And somehow there's something very similar in an experience with 5-MeO DMT, that there's a potential for the you, the self, the I, to die. And there's a great benefit, I would say, to put it lightly, to dying before we die. Because the amount of appreciation, compassion for ourselves that results of, now I have felt, now I have a felt sense of a certain knowing.
Doing a podcast, YouTube retort. Going to be doing a podcast and YouTube recording with Chad Charles, who was my facilitator for my 5-MeO DMT experience. It was probably one of the most life-changing experiences of my life, so I'm very grateful that he has the time to speak to us today and to drop some wisdom. I'm going to timestamp the different parts of the conversation below, so that you can go back and forth. But if you are considering this psychedelic journey, I very much recommend you listen to the whole thing. That's it. Yeah, so welcome, Chad. Thank you for taking this time with us. And one of the things that I found the most interesting when I got to know you is how you got into being a facilitator in all things, and especially the 5-MeO DMT, which we'll talk about. And I will ask you to share with us what it actually means, what it is, and if you want to share with us what feels right to share in terms of how you got into this space and what got you to take on this task. I don't know if that's the word, but this undertaking, because it's a pretty big one. Anyone who has tried it, like I think the first thing I told you is, I don't know how you did this. I don't know how you held that space, but it's really spectacular to witness and to go through.
Thank you. How I got into this work is, it's kind of a cryptic story, if you will. And what I mean by that is, I didn't, it wasn't something that I aspired to do. Like I had an idea in my mind one day, I'm going to be a 5-MeO DMT practitioner one day, and I'm going to go to the school where that happens, and you get a certificate for it, and you get a license or whatnot. That didn't happen. It doesn't happen. It doesn't really exist. I mean, one can aspire to do that, but it didn't come into my life in that way. Rather, when I was using it for my own personal and spiritual development, I was kind of led by people along on my path, right? The proverbial path, led to what amounted to be a small collective of practitioners in Mexico City that kind of took me under their wing, so to speak, and taught me, I guess, what they know, and equipped me with perhaps a very basic foundation for holding space, as we say, for an experience like this. And I was very naive about all that happening. I didn't really realize that was happening, that I was sort of being groomed for that to happen. And yet, when it dawned on me, when it became obvious that, oh, that's what's happening, that's what's going on here, I took that as, I trusted that. I trust when something is coming my way without my maybe egoic desire, wanting to, that's what I want. Rather, it seemed to be wanted of me, and so I followed that and haven't looked back since.
I find that super interesting, that the trust part, especially of this is what's wanted. And I'm curious if you could share if there's a way that you kind of knew, if it was a body thing, or how did you know? Because I know people will wonder that. How did you trust that part?
Well, it all kind of happened in a period of time where I guess I there's a kind of a metaphor or like this image that I have. It didn't exactly go like this, but I was arriving in Mexico City, and I was very reluctant to go there. And I was told that I was going to go and work with someone, and I guess that meant, I was going to be having experiences myself. That's why I was there. And even then I didn't really realize what I was doing. And so I remember just standing at the door of some address that I was told to go to. And when the door opened, it it was kind of like, and the rest of my time there, it was kind of like there was a surprise party. It's like, surprise. And I was like, well, okay. I'm like, yeah, you made it. And I was like, made what? I don't know what this means. Ah, well, you got here. You um, you followed the signs, and you battled with the doubts and the skepticism and the unknown, and yet you're still here. And I was like, wow, okay, I don't even know what that means just yet. And they're like, well, now we get to tell you why you're here and why you've come. Okay. And so little by little, again, pretty naive, not really seeing that, not really feeling that either. There was elements where I was assisting other practitioners in their offerings, and being shown, and kind of feeling, well, bewildered as to why am I being shown this? What's happening there? So there was a lot of, I guess, confusion until until I was told to take charge, to take a different role in my in my little practicum. And then it kind of dawned on me, oh, this is what's happening. And yeah, there was a full body kind of landing. Something landed in me, and that landing was a kind of a relief or an exhale, like, oh. And I don't know if I was in a contracted place of that confusion where what's going on here? I'm not sure. But there was a, oh, okay, I see. And it was very humbling. So kind of like, me? This? Oh, okay. Can I still trust this? And at that point, to say no, to listen to the doubter in me, somehow would have been a grand resistance. And I was learning about resistance, and I was learning about surrender and going with the flow. And the flow was what was happening. And I understood that there's no going back.
Well, that definitely landed with me, and especially having gone through the ceremony and ritual with you, the part about resistance and letting go and surrendering. But I want to at this point explain what the 5-MeO DMT is. If you could explain it in your terms of what it means, what it does, and what is potentially the difference between that and bufo, because I know in Mexico that's the term they use, if I'm not mistaken. And so just to understand what are we talking about here exactly? Because we've been cryptic a little so far. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to start off with, I'm really happy that there's an element of something that's cryptic, because and I say we, just thinking of humans in general, big generalization, of course, we want to know, and we want to really put a magnifying glass on all of the things that point us in a particular direction. And so when I think of explaining what is 5-MEO DMT, as if somebody who doesn't have a chemistry background is going to know what that is, or that it even matters, is that here is something like any or many, I would say any, methodologies or modalities of liberation, of self-realization, of personal and spiritual development. Everything is pointing towards something. that the way is not the destination. And so 5-MeO DMT is one of these things that's pointing somewhere. So there's that old saying of there's a finger pointing towards the moon. Why are you looking at the finger? And so 5-MeO DMT is a finger and it's pointing somewhere. So we can put a lot of attention on the finger, and that's only going to get us so far. But for the sake of informing others, well, it's a molecule, and the molecule is taken in the body, and it can be taken in the body many ways. It's a very versatile molecule. And I think it's versatile because somehow there's something that's not foreign about the interaction of the molecule with the body. There's theories that 5-MeO DMT is endogenous to the human body. It either is already there or it is, let's say, biosynthesized by a variety of processes in the body. And whether or not those are true, I don't know. What I can say is that when the body receives it, it is received very quickly, right? It passes the blood-brain barrier very quickly. And so there's something that is immediate in its effect, and it's metabolized incredibly quickly. And so I kind of have this image of the Pac-Man game where there's like this, the figure is gobbling up all of the things. And so it's kind of brain food, like your whole body just kind of gobbles that up. And when it's over, it's over, right? It's taken it all in. It's satisfied itself. It's all there and it's metabolized. And so there's an effect when the gobbling is happening. And then when the figure has gobbled up all of perhaps the molecules, then the effect is over. And so there's something, when I experience that, I think to myself, wow, there's something very natural here. There's something very, it's welcomed and well received by the body. And then, well, it's over, or it's gone. It's been used up. It's been metabolized. So when we take the substance, the molecule, exogenously, so we're taking it outside and we're bringing it into our body, well, that can come in many different forms. So molecules can be assembled, right, by humans. We can put them together. We put this atom and with this atom, and we create things. Genius. Humans are amazing. 5-MeO DMT can be identified in plants all over the world. There's all kinds of plants that have this in a variety of different concentrations. And then there is this very extraordinary species of toad that in its secretion, there is a high concentration of the molecule. And because of its high concentration from that organic product, or the one that comes straight from this toad, which is endemic to a particular region in North America, it can be used in a very similar way than if you just used the molecule itself. And so, as you said, bufo, sometimes it's called, which is a kind of a misnomer in a sense, because bufo just means it's the genus, taxonomical genus for all toads, of which there are hundreds of different species. But this is a very specific species. And so sometimes it's called bufo. Sometimes it's called sapo, which means toad in Spanish. Sometimes it's called toad when speaking in English. And it's used there and has been used probably, I think, since the early 1980s, the bufo. Whereas the molecule has been synthesized, I think the first time was in the 1930s in Japan, and from what I understand, and then it has been and continues to be identified in plants around the world.
Mm-hmm. And so I think an automatic question that comes is, well, for me, what makes it that humans respond to it? Even myself, during our ritual, I had two very opposite responses. One that was horrible, but served me in a very great way. I would define it as horrible. and the other that was completely liberating and life-changing. And so
Okay, I'm in the wee hours editing the video, and it felt really important for me to pause right here to not dismiss the horrible experience as not transformational, because it was exceptionally transformational as well. And I'm going to link a video below where I'm going to dive into the experience, the journey that I had even more, and explain why I'm so grateful that I did get to witness myself in that fear, and very much what felt like I'm dying is really what it felt like. So Chad is really going to go into it later and explain and extract the different layers of some of the things I experienced, but it felt so important for me to pause right here and mention that, because I know that before deciding to go on the experience, I was very afraid of having a bad response. And now that I had both a what they call a dual and non-dual experience, I know for me that's what my human needed, and I'm very grateful.
what happens when, because you're right, when you ingest it, it was like just like that, 1, 2, and it's over. So you're somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like what happens? Why, why some humans they're into it and then the other ones are struggling and not as into it, I guess, in some ways.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'll use a little metaphor. I love metaphors because to speak of this experience directly is nearly impossible. So I kind of imagine um, somebody's driving a car, and maybe the car pulls up at a red light or a stop sign, and somebody just maybe on the street or whatever comes up to the driver's side, taps on the window, and you lower the window and get curious about, well, what's coming at me here, and whoever that is says something like, hey, what would it be like if I drove for a while? And everybody behind the steering wheel will have a different reaction. Everybody. I imagine that there's probably 8 billion possibilities of what ensues from that point. And so the range might be something like, what? You drive? What are you talking about? This is my car. I'm in control here. I know where I'm going. I know how to operate this. I've been doing this all my life. You mean drive? You can't drive my car. This is mine. Like, get out of here or get in the back seat. Like, no. And another possible, perhaps contrasting example might be like, oh, that's such a good idea. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I've been driving all day. Sure. Here, take the keys. Maybe I'll just go on the passenger side and watch the world go by or have a nap. The question to the driver is the same, but somehow there's a defense in us that has a different relationship to losing control. And so as there's this invitation to lose control and to discover what happens when I'm not in control, everybody will have a different reaction. And our reaction will be a part of that human aspect of like placing things into categories that are very simplistic, like something's good or bad, something's black or white, something's positive or negative. This is horrible. This is pleasant. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we get to decide and choose our preferences. And so, and yet the character that's come to the driver's side to ask if they could drive is neutral. It's not really trying to please the one behind the wheel. And so there's all these different experiences that we might have, because the invitation, and I think that the special design of this substance, this molecule, this medicine, whatever you want to call it. Some people will call it even a sacrament. There's something very sacred about what's happening here. There's an invitation for the I, the self-referencer, the self-identifier. Go offline for a very short period of time. And not all parts of us are comfortable in doing that. And yet, when it happens, we get to learn how we can move perhaps more easefully in life without having to be in control all the time. Perhaps even debunking a sort of myth that we have about ourselves that we are the driver of the car. Maybe we're even thinking that we are the car.
I don't think I could have picked a better analogy. Like as you were speaking, everything I was like, that's exactly how it feels like. Because I mean, a bit into my situation, I think something led me to this experience. And it's like the moment I handed over the keys, I felt instant regret, instant resistance. And that's what made it feel very scary. And then just hanging on to my breath and waiting to get the key back, basically. And
right.
And then the trust to go again and say, you know what, maybe this time, what if I were to just see where you're going to take me and just let go? It really did lead to, it did feel very sacred, and a place where Atena, myself, didn't really exist. Like I was there, I was conscious that I was there, but my identity as itself, they didn't come along. And there was something very beautiful about that, and very, it felt like a coming home, like this an ease that settled in, and a rebirth almost on the way back, which was one of my goals. That's an intention that I'd said. I didn't know if that would happen, but that really is what kind of it felt like. And so when you speak about it in that term, in that analogy, it really, really resonates. Because and I have to say that it, when we spoke about earlier about trust, to surrender and letting go, and wondering, okay, well, am I really the one actually driving this vehicle? Or what would it feel like to let go and be led, and let a higher power lead at times? It's, for me anyways, it definitely has taken a weight off my shoulders. And something that I speak about privately, and I guess now publicly, would be that I very much had a lot of functional depression going in through life. And a lot of times when life came at a crossroad or a crunch or something that just was too hard or challenging, and I use quotations because I very much agree with you, Chad, that we like to label things, we like to box them in so that we figure it out. My instant thought was, why don't I just jump off a bridge? And I know that sounds maybe weird for some people to hear, but that really was like, I'm like, how could I just end this life? And after this experience, I didn't relate to that anymore, because I thought, well, yeah, sometimes things are challenging, but I don't have, first of all, I don't have to figure everything out myself. And also, I don't know if anyone else has ever felt like this, but it made me kind of feel like there was no end. So I'd be jumping off a bridge for what? What would I really be ending? And so it kind of removed that option in a way of life, and said, okay, well, it's okay to deal with things and to not know, and to be scared and to be upset, and the cycle will continue, and you don't have to take everything with you. I don't know if you've had that ever come up with other people, but for me, it was very resounding.
Well, sure. If I could take what you shared there briefly, and just kind of extract different qualities that are part of that story. So acceptance of like, okay, this is my experience, and it's okay. It's okay that that's my experience. This quality of being so maybe even frustrated, or a kind of even ennui of self, of like, I'm almost sick of myself, I'm tired of myself, and I don't want this self to exist, right? We can come to that point where we want to check out, and kind of cease this self identifier of existing. And of course, not knowing what comes after, so to speak, And somehow there's something very similar in an experience with 5-MeO DMT, that there's a potential for the you, the self, the I, to die. And there's a great benefit, I would say, to put it lightly, to dying before we die. Because the amount of appreciation, compassion for ourselves that results of, now I have felt, now I have a felt sense of a certain knowing. Of course, it's not a cognitive knowing, but there's something that I have lived, that I have been shown, so to speak. And if, I use that word very carefully, because we're always thinking that there's a vision, because we're so used to sight and being shown things. And yet there's call it a showing or a demonstration or a transmission or a download, or just a shock of, there's something here that is, I don't know, the life force of this vehicle, the life force of this car, of this vessel that I embody and inhabit, and yet I am somehow something else, that I am something greater or grander than what I've been identifying with. And so to me, a lot of the key features here are about identity and our attachment, conscious or unconscious, to different identities of ourselves, which are just elements of being alive. We come in and we're a blank slate, so to speak, with some genetic pre-programming, of course, and then we learn. And oftentimes it's not something that we signed up to learn, but it's something then that we're conditioned by and with. And as we come into adulthood, then we might not really feel like what we've learned along the way, not by our choice, but by conditioning, that many of these things are not what are serving us, or they're no longer applicable, because we've come into a degree of maturity. And without any kind of rites of passages or initiations in, say, modern contemporary culture, what can result is this malaise, this depression, this seemingly dissatisfaction with what is. And it's terrible. And yet there are many ways that are pointing us out of that. And this substance is one of them. And it's a very efficient one.
Definitely. I especially when you said that we need some form of reintegration, that really, really resonated. It's actually a thought I've had for over a year now. I wonder what would happen to us if we, at a certain age, after our brain is developed, we just press pause for a few months and go and reintegrate. And I wonder, people say, I don't have time. I'm like, well, we spend our whole life chasing, trying to feel good with this attachment and trying to detach. What if we just press pause for a little bit? There's something that was very special about the way we did the ritual, the way you facilitate the ritual, because I did talk to some friends and we compared our journeys, and I think that everyone's journey is unique, but I definitely was very grateful and that you were the person that guided me. And I know that we did even an hour of breath work before, and even that was very transformative. And I love that you use analogies, because it stuck to me, the one about the balloon, because for everyone who's listening, Chad asked me, he's like, just breathe. And I was like, trying to control the breath out.
Right.
You said, what if you just breathe? And I was like, what do you mean? Not control the breath? And you used the analogy of the balloon. You put air in the balloon. What if you were to just let it go where it goes? And it was very oddly revolutionary, even as someone who does a lot of breath work, like breathe. And so I'm curious for anyone who's listening and who's seeking to perhaps seek to work with you or seeking to explore this sacred substance, medicine, plant medicine, however you want to define it. What are some of the things that you would recommend them to tune into themselves and say, okay, well, what could be potentially the scenario that serves me best?
Yeah, thank you for that. This is a very important question and topic in what I would call the unregulated field, right? So I'm a substance-assisted therapist, and there is no regulation around what I do, which means that there's no authority, but there's also no network of checks and balances that keeps me as a practitioner in line. Sure, in the unregulated field, there is a code of ethics and there are best practices to adhere to, but I do so voluntarily. Whereas not everybody is going to do that, nor do they answer to an authority or a body of enforcement. And so what that means is that when a prospective participant is entering into a modality in the unregulated field, that places a lot of responsibility on you as a prospective participant, because there's no standardization. And so not all practitioners are the same. They're not working in the same style because there's no standard style. There's no tradition either. And not only that, then there's quality or caliber or competency. And so there is no standardization of that either. And so the question is, well, how do I know? How do I know what I'm walking into? Well, as if you're asking yourself that question, you're already off to a good start. Many people come to me and they have some sort of like carte blanche, like they're just like, no, I just trust you. And to me, it's a little bit of a red flag. You just trust me. You have no idea what you're approaching here, nor do you really know me. And so I think to myself, there might be a little bit of, I guess the difference between trust, which is great, let's follow our trust more in life. Yes. And then there's discernment. Mm-hmm. How well are we discerning what it is that we want to trust? Oftentimes that trust might be out of a misplaced desperation or an ambition for something very particular and wonderful and to happen for us and to us, noble intentions. And so, well, this is my avenue, this is my ticket. It's happening now. Maybe it's ephemeral. Maybe there's this person, and so we just want to say yes. And yet, hey, this is big. We're not using or mincing words here. We're not using words like liberation and sacred in a derogatory or in a way that's less meaningful than what they really can mean. And so I encourage people to ask questions. Now it's like, well, what should I know? Well, there's a great guide, and I think that if people are interested in having an experience and you encounter a practitioner, there is in this unregulated field a body of, let's call it wisdom. There's a collective that has produced a code of ethics, a series of best practices that practitioners can adhere to. And part of that best practices is a synopsis. And the synopsis of that best practices that is geared towards practitioners is for a prospective participant. And it's a 3-page little document giving you all of these ideas of things that you might want to know before working with this medicine, but also going into the offering of that particular practitioner. And so that where you can find that is on theconclave.info, and you go and find the synopsis. And here is this brilliant and array of questions that you don't have to ask them all. And yet you might think, oh yeah, that is a good thing to know, because I don't have to wonder about these things when I go see a dentist, because all the dentists have been through all the same rigorous application of educating themselves and creating competency. And yet in my field, that doesn't exist. And so you need to take care of you. Mm-hmm.
I remember that document. I remember it.
Okay.
It was very helpful. Great. And it also helped to listen. I know I listened to you quite a bit before I booked my session, and I did my own little research. And I remember those still before the ceremony, I started asking like a lot of questions. And that's when you said, okay, listen, now you got to trust yourself. I think down to what should I eat before?
Sure,
which is, you know, there's a limit, I guess.
Even just to touch on that, Atena, if you will, there's that element of trust and discernment. We're doing due diligence. And that's something that in the regulated fields of which many of us live, we don't need to do because it's being done for us. We have these institutions that create standards of safety where we don't really have to think for ourselves. And yet here we have to do due diligence. And so you did. You did some research. And I say, bravo, absolutely. When somebody's asking me questions, when we're meeting, I think, oh, this person is taking responsibility for themselves. And yeah, maybe it's out of this imbalanced kind of level of fear or distrust at first, but it's about building trust. Let's build trust. And at a certain point, when the trust is there, the mind might still wanting to be getting all of the details, so it thinks it understands what's going to happen, because that's what the mind wants to do. It wants to understand. However, it often wants to understand because it's a way or a strategy to control and to make sure that there's a part of what's going on here that I'm going to stay behind that driver's seat, right? There's a part of me that's still got my hand on the stick shift. Mm-hmm. And so, when we're getting closer to the event and I'm sharing with you, okay, how did you get here? Well, you did some research, you found trust to come here. Ultimately, there's no other way. And if trust is what is dominating your movement towards, then look no further. Just go with that. Anything else is but a distraction. It's taking your attention away from something that trust is leading you towards. And I think that is ultimately the most important aspect.
Well said. I like that. Yeah, I guess the question is, and I don't know if there's something you could answer, but what are some of the things that you have seen over the years that have surprised you, amazed you, or an experience perhaps that you had yourself that was profound that you would maybe want to share?
Yeah, thank you. Well, now after a number of years of doing this full time, it might sound a little glib to say, but nothing really surprises me. There's something utterly unpredictable about this experience. And so I don't want to say that I've seen it all, and yet at the same time, I've seen a lot. And yet what inspires me, maybe more so than surprises me, is the two things. The human spirit, the human condition that propels us to self-realize, that propels us to kind of refine ourselves, not eliminate ourselves, but to see what are elements of me, my story, my meanness that I can embrace, and what are elements of me that I can transform into something that is healthier or more appropriate or conducive to the life I find myself living and the environments in which I dwell. And so just to see people overcome so many different hurdles. Yours is a great story of coming out of a depression that has at its extreme this element of like ceasing to be, a desire to cease to be. Wow, that's strong. And for that to be alleviated, that's exceptional. That's extraordinary. And I see that all the time. And it is part of that homecoming that, for many, this experience will be a revelation. And yet for many, it's a confirmation. This experience and what we feel, because it's a felt experience, it's already always there. It was never not there. And yet there are many veils that have different thicknesses and different levels of opaqueness and transparency that prevent us from feeling that. Mm-hmm. And to see people part those veils, metaphorically speaking, which isn't necessarily easy. Some of them are, like I said, they're dense. Some of them are thick. Some of them have been there the whole time, and they've really lodged themselves into our being. And so coming through, and you said there was kind of like a rebirth. Well, what's happening? The child is coming out from this womb, from this place that is so primordial and so safe, but also so identityless. Right? That's the preconditioned human being. And yet here it comes, and it's going to be exposed to all this new reality. Yes. Wow. And so to see people not rebirth themselves as in like, well, now everything I've been living is no longer valid or relevant, or it doesn't matter. No, it does. Of course it does. And yet, somebody said to me once, you asked me, Chad, what I want to let go of. Frankly, I don't really know. But what I'm really interested in is to see what's left when I come back. What's left when I come through? Then I can look at that and say, well, if that's what's left, perhaps I can embrace that. Perhaps that's okay. Perhaps that's a part of me that, with some acceptance and compassion and some love, that I can be okay with who I am. And that alone, that surrender, is part of the healing process. On the other side, what I can also be, I don't know if it's inspiring, but it's impressive, is how strong the elements of control can be. So strong. I feel like the human being can take an experience of any magnitude and put it up on a bookshelf with the rest of the dusty DVDs that we'll never watch again, check it off of our experience bucket list, and not do anything about it. But it's perhaps the most profound experience a human being may ever live. And yet, we don't do anything with it. We're also capable of that. Wow. And that amazes me. Amazing. It's not exactly what I wish for a client or a participant coming into this, but I have to let go of what I want, because this isn't about me either. And so every time I'm in an offering, I'm in a session with somebody, I'm also practicing the lessons of this medicine, which is to let go and to surrender to something else.
I could definitely see, when you're speaking, it's like I just started remembering everything and how it can be so easy to just be so scared in some ways and just say, okay, I'm just going to put that away because I don't understand it. But the point is not necessarily to understand it. I'm for sure going to speak about this even more and more. It's definitely been a very life-changing experience in terms of extracting a wisdom of things I already knew, but now it was like confirmation, like you said, in some ways. And for anyone who's listening to this and who, I know you're a bit of a globetrotter, I follow you sometimes. You're here, you're there. If they want to work with you, what's the best way to reach you, if you could share that?
Yeah, well, you can go to my website, which is chadcharles.net, and just reach out. There's a contact form there. Tell me, I'm guessing that those who are listening and watching right now might be all over the planet. My private practice is based in Montreal. I do go to other cities, but typically within a learning project, because I help mentor other practitioners. And so they bring me into their communities so that they can shadow me and I can supervise them. Otherwise, people come to this wonderful city to have a visit and spend time with me in my studio, which you've been. And I also go to Toronto frequently as well. I don't regularly go to other places, but I'm open to it. I'm open to spreading this goodness wherever I can. And so all it requires is a reaching out with an idea. Hey, I'm in this country. I'm in this city. I would really like to begin working with you. Okay, well, here's some options. Perhaps you want to share this not only with yourself, but with your social or other networks. Okay, well, perhaps then if I go all the way to wherever you are, this can be shared amongst many. We can create a plan around that.
That was actually a question I forgot to ask, what the difference would be. I'm very happy I did the ceremony private, but I wonder what it would be like to do it with a group of people maybe for a weekend or a week. I don't know how that would work if you do that often. Or
I don't do that often, and it's not what I meant by sharing it amongst many. I meant just to have individual sessions in a short period of time with many people. And I do have a retreat format with 6 people, 3 nights. We're using breath work. It's a combination also of working with the medicine individually. So there's a therapeutic element where that's very customized and personalized to you. And then there's a more of a energetic, ceremonial, shamanic element where we're working together as a group, all in the same retreat. And so that is something also possible. I don't do it often, maybe once or twice a year, but I will go out of my way to lead and host such an event because it's powerful, to say the least.
amazing. Well, Chad, thank you so much for everything. It's this, just speaking to you and going over it, I feel already another sense of calmness coming over the body, which really just shows me that I'm in the right place, having the right conversations. And I'm curious, before we depart or before we end this interview, if there's anything else on your heart that you'd want to share, really anything that comes to you.
Sure. Simply, no one needs to do this, what we're talking about. No one needs to do it. And yet, if you are watching and listening to this, may you not so quickly dismiss it as something that's flickering across your screen. May the fact that this has captured your attention now be a part of the guidance system that is continually and eternally leading us towards something that all of these pointers are going towards, which has no name. So that's what I have to say. That's all.
Perfect. I love that. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so welcome, Charles. Chad, sorry, Chad Charles. We didn't get it wrong off the get-go. I told you, just be you, relax. So
It's all good.